John Ren was gonna come, but, and I think Mark had asked me, so I thought he might be coming. He just texted me to see if he was still on. Maybe he's listening. Are you all set?
Yeah, this is good to go.
So I don't know what kind of format you guys wanna operate with. I mean, you can just go through the agenda if you want.
Yes.
I mean, it's sort of a joint meeting, not everybody's one meeting, so. Before we get started, this is really a workshop format, not a regular meeting format, so it's pretty informal. And the other thing is, I just wanted to be sure, I'll call the meeting to order. And then I want to be sure everybody knows everybody, or do we need to do introductions, or should we do introductions? Everybody's good? Okay. Yep, all right.
You're all familiar.
So I think the first topic on the agenda is, and I think our goal is to get out of here no later than 7, because you guys have a meeting, so we'll try to make it pretty quick. And sooner if that works. We'll see what the questions are. So first is up is the school committee report on their upcoming fiscal year 27 budget, and then we had such a few questions about sort of staffing and operations, just so we're on, we know what we have. So I guess you guys can start off.
Okay, yep. So thank you. It's good to see everybody. Launch the process for this year. So both the version that Vika provided and kind of, the packet that kind of is what we've been using in our budget development is reflects kind of the initial draft of the budget I presented at our first meeting in February on February 3rd. So that's kind of where we stand. And we're slated to approve budget at our first meeting in April. So that's about 99 and then move through before finalizing everything for the warrant. So I'll do just a quick high level kind of overview in terms of what we have. So the first couple pages in the packet, just to again share, wasn't necessarily on here, but obviously drives what we do is our enrollment. So the first page of our little packet just is kind of shaded. You see enrollment this year. We're anticipating welcome, gentlemen.
Oh,
Yeah, there's copies there. Yeah. We're expecting 13 island students at CIS, 2 at the middle school in Yarmouth and 7 at the high school in Yarmouth. So maintaining generally kind of our numbers at CIS in terms of island students, with a slight decrease going over to Yarmouth. And so that's how, as we'll look at the budget, has some slight budget impacts. The second page of kind of the enrollment is just focused on CIS and where you see kind of our targets for both resident and kind of our mainland tuition students. So we're projecting to be in this 22 to 24 range for the coming year. So split almost evenly between, resident and mainland students with, more resident students. So that's what we're programming for in terms of our budget. Any pause to start enrollment questions?
And the significance of the red outline.
The red outlines has been kind of part of our planning. We're just aware, in the coming years, we'll have a kind of denser cohort in pre-KK that may necessitate in the future years some additional staffing, but was not present for us this year. So it was just kind of highlighting it as we are looking ahead to kind of forecast.
And Erin, will you anticipate the students attending now will continue right
Yep,
on through
we've
grade 5?
gotten, yes, of our returning students, all have already, kind of signed contracts for next year, and we're well into the process of doing visits and explore.
And if someone didn't come, you would fill that spot?
Right, yep. Yep. Mhm. Yeah, so we're up to 11. As we flip to the next page, we're budgeting on the low end conservatively for 9 enrollments. So now moving to just kind of the high level budget summary. I'll just kind of speak briefly to this high level. You have the details and provided. But on the revenue side, forecasting some increases in revenue. Their state contribution went up slightly. We, I think, are getting a better handle on what to expect in terms of meals reimbursements with the number of students we have and the reimbursement rates. So we're projecting, not a huge dollar amount, but a significant increase on that front in terms of revenue over the course of the coming year. And then for tuition, we, moved it up one, in terms of a minimum of 9 enrollments, for the tuition revenue. So we are maintaining our $5,000 tuition cost. Our current programming still, the additional students has not necessitated additional staffing or any significant additional costs. So we believe, there was no kind of just, since the rationale has not been financial, it's been to diversify the academic and social peers and to make it as accessible for as many as possible.
Is that capped at 9 or could it go up?
To 11.
11?
Yeah,
So it
11.
could go up 2 more.
Yeah, correct. Yep. Mhm.
But you have 13 coming. Oh, 11, I see.
Yeah, 13 resident students, IELTS students.
Thank you.
So on the expense side, I'll speak to a few of the kind of significant changes. So obviously take a moment to appreciate and acknowledge that the FY27 budget has no more MSAD 51 debt. So in that first one, this will be the first school budget with no debt payments to MSAD 51. So that's, yeah. So we're excited to be at that spot.
Erin, if you have 11 students in 2027, is it 5,000 per student?
5,000, yeah, correct.
So wouldn't 11 times 5 be?
We expected, so just to conservative, we don't fill the full 11,
Okay.
right? So just to
Thank
be
you.
conservative and not overestimate our revenue.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Sorry, I didn't mean to follow up, but yes, we're going to celebrate the party.
Yeah. In terms of the cost centers, and I think we'll talk about some of the things in terms of staffing and insurance costs, but no significant changes in the next two kind of expense categories: systems administration and school administration. Those changes roughly reflect the just kind of ongoing rollover increase in insurance and staffing costs. Elementary education, we actually, despite, the kind of projected rollover costs for insurance and those kinds of things, the increases in salary, but we do see a slight decrease that has to do primarily with some of the small reduction in numbers for Yarmouth tuition. Because if you'll, the prior page, we're going down in terms of our Yarmouth school enrollment. So that kind of compensates somewhat for those increases.
Is the school debt, does it tally with the annual? In other words, what am I trying to ask? It's all done this year, correct?
Well done. We've made the last payment. It's
Okay.
already out the door. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. So yeah, that last payment this year was that essentially 27,457. So that's all fully off the books at this point. In terms of student and staff support, no, again, not a big financial change. That position shifted from an employee, W-2 employee, to a contract position. We have a contractor providing social work services. So there were some nominal cost savings around fringe benefits and waivers and some of the withholdings and so forth. As well as kind of just a little budget cleanup. Special education, we see a slight increase there. That has to do with kind of budgeting for some increased costs of special education services actually in Yarmouth is the primary driver for some of those changes, in addition to some of the staffing, rollover insurance projection increases and kind of salary increases. So facilities, transportation, and food services. One dynamic kind of happening across all three of those is this budget reflecting with a staffing change we made over the summer. So over the summer, because of the new bus that we purchased last year, that does not require the operator to have the formal full bus driver license, we had more flexibility with that position. And so we reorganized our what had been essentially half-time bus driver, half-time custodian. The positions had been, one position was custodian and kitchen in a smaller part-time position for bus driver. So we reorganized those to have a dedicated position for the kitchen, because our experience had been that that was where all of the kitchen custodian person's time went, because you had lots of smiling faces, eager for food every day. That was the priority. That had a hard time getting to the cleaning in the same way we would always want them to. And then we had flexibility with the bus driver. So this year, what we have is the bus driver and custodian positions are married, right? And the kitchen manager is its own position. So this reflects some reallocation of both hours and an insurance like enrollment to kind of reflect that staffing arrangement. So on the facility side, that's part of what you see happening there in the increase. Also budgeted in there are a couple of priorities that we've talked about on the school committee side, which is doing a little bit of playground refresh, some new chips, mats under the swings, some attention to some of the natural play areas, the beloved boat, you know, has maybe some nails poke, you know, things that just need to be tightened up a little bit. So a little refresh there, as well as beginning a cycle of some regular maintenance of kind of interior painting to just, you know, we've now been in the building for a number of years. And it just needs a little bit of attention. So there's some investment within the facilities line that's reflected there in that increase. On the transportation side, this is again part of kind of the reconfiguration of the positions, as that position had been 25 hours with a full healthcare enrollment, and that's now less than that. It's 17.5 hours and only half of an insurance kind of subscription. So that's part of why we see that reduction there. And then lastly, on the food service side, while it looks like a significant addition, this is again where you see the impact of that change. It's now including the full position, an increased number of hours, as well as the full enrollment, full health insurance enrollment for that position there, as well as, and you'll see this as we get into capital planning, we're due for a new dishwasher. We've been having some issues with our dishwasher. And so there's that cost, that purchase kind of baked into that cost as well. So those are some of the kind of just changes that are underneath what you see here and that. So lastly, I appreciate the work we've been doing with Mark Roy in terms of helping us kind of think about and how we talk about, kind of this. This is our operating budget within the general fund. So we are committing, 35,000 of our undesignated fund towards kind of our operating budget. So 20 of that is to kind of just minimize, any potential tax increase. 15 of that is to be able to do a couple of these one-time investments, the playground refresh and the dishwasher purchase. So that's what you see there in terms of the undesignated fund set aside, and then accounting for our kind of federal special ed entitlement. That's the IDEA local entitlement, which is about $9,000, which offsets part of our teacher salary that's in our operating budget. So that's why it's included here as kind of an offset. So the sum total means, given the revenue increases, some of the kind of changes on the expense side, however, it would be less than 1% of an impact to kind of the local tax rate. So the local contribution would be nearly flat in terms of the kind of required local contribution. So that 0.8%.
Does that include the debt service, or is that just? Does that take into account the debt?
It takes into account all of the kind of changes up above in the revenue and the expense changes. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, if we weren't retiring the debt, what would it be?
I haven't calculated that, but we would be, putting back in that approximately
Putting back in 37
or 27.
27,000.
27.
Yeah, but that was only 27 because this was the last payment. It had been historically 130-ish. So yeah, it was consistently 10% of our budget.
Right. Okay.
Up until this past year.
Right.
Yeah, current year.
Thank you.
Right.
Karen, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
The facilities, does that include the ball field?
The ball field, no, we're not responsible. That changed in this current year's budget.
That breaks under now?
Yes.
Thank you.
And can I just ask a question?
Yep.
So custodials and facilities,
Yes.
and then transportation is the bus driver, food services is the food service person, and then as a net hours for those positions, has there been a net increase in hours?
Of 5, yeah,
Okay.
we've found that the kitchen manager position was, given our enrollments and various things. So a net increase of just 5 hours total across all those positions, all those components.
Any more questions? Okay,
Yes, thank you. So I'm looking at this, which is your summary.
Mhm.
And I'm looking at page 9 of our packet. So when I'm looking at the expenditure total, they're not the same as what we have on page 9. Am I correct? 1121.
The percentage you're talking about?
Yeah, so I'm looking at fiscal year 26.
So
Oh, it is, okay.
page 9,
Yeah.
the school budget?
just the school one, yeah,
A little bit
so,
different.
Aaron had given me their first draft of the budget a number of weeks ago,
Okay.
and that's been incorporated. What is not taken into the consideration here is some of the revenues that he just talked about that are slightly different, which probably, because I think if you look at, they're at 3.69%, and this shows at 3.84. So my suspicion is because some of like the undesignated fund that he was just referring to is a little bit higher from what was in last year's. The revenue part I did not touch. And so now that we have these numbers, I can put that in, and I have a feeling they're gonna be a lot more even from what he provided to the higher number that's in the town.
Thank you. So when I'm looking at the column fiscal year 2027 for your budget summary, do the categories under expenses, so for example, school administration, elementary education, that includes all health insurance, all of the expenses related to that?
Yes.
And for special education, is that for special education that should be done in school as well as at Yarmouth?
Right.
So there's a what is the?
We're required as part of our, in a tuition agreement, right, that we have, that there's a formula where we get charged some amounts, right, based on the services.
Based on the
students-
services
yeah,
the student
based-
needs,
it's
right.
very specifically on the student's IEP and thus the
Okay.
services that they receive.
That makes sense. Thank you.
And will that, so for students that are tuitioning in, if they go on to the Yarmouth school system, are we responsible for their special ed? No, only if they're resident students.
Only if they're resident students, yeah,
We also don't have any Yarmouth students currently
right, yeah,
enrolled, they're all from other communities.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. but even, regardless.
Yeah, that's a good point, Carly.
Well, no, I mean, I think we, have
Right,
Yarmouth
yes, we've
students
made
if that works for
some-
their families that should be going to school, but it's just right now they're from other communities.
Yep.
I think the last thing I was just on the kind of general fund side, again, just credit to Mark and helping advance kind of my ability to articulate it well, but just as that page with the undesignated fund balance, being able to kind of more clearly track where we stand with that, right? And a lot of this is pending, obviously, audits and kind of final totals, but just in terms of the full general funds, right? This is what we're going to be anticipating. So based on the work with Mark and his closing of the books, right, this was the top line figure of FY25 end balance was what we had as a positive undesignated fund balance. We have 165,000 in reserve contributions that's a school committee approved in 2024, right? That need to go through that have not yet gone through the town warrant process for formal inclusion. That this is why there had appeared to be the deficits in the reserve account, and thus there was the warrant for a contribution, which is the second line at the January 24th special meeting of the additional 44.5 that was approved at that special meeting. And then based on the significant balance here, currently recommending an additional 155 of contributions to our reserve accounts. And we can look at the capital plan later. So that would leave us with how we're tracking our current operating year budget of having a surplus of that 78,000 roughly, right? We'll track that to the end. We'd have an end year balance of 101,000. By state law, schools can only maintain a maximum of 9% in our undesignated fund of our prior year budget. So our maximum allowable balance would be at 106. So we'd be underneath that. So that's part of what's driving the recommendation of the additional contributions to our reserve accounts. So, and then you can see FY27, those commitments I mentioned, 20,000 towards our overall operating budget to kind of reduce tax impact, and the 15,000 for a couple of priority investments, so that we're not needing to raise additional funds, but using funds that exist in our undesignated fund balance for that playground update and dishwasher. So we'd be working through next fiscal year with a undesignated fund balance in the neighborhood of 66,000
So it's 9% of the operating budget
of the prior year's
of the
operating
prior
budget.
year's budget.
Yep.
And Aaron, I'm sorry, I didn't quite follow you on the 165. So are you saying that as a school committee for fiscal year 25, you designated 165,000 to go into your reserve funds, but they didn't move into those funds?
Well, this is where I think Mark has helped us with
Right.
our accounting, right? They have been reflected consistently since the summer of 2024 in the Machias bank statements, like as a cash transfer that happened, but they hadn't gone through a town warrant process to have it formally approved, because the contributions need to be approved by voters, right? And then expenses under the purview of the school committee. So I anticipate, like, what we're planning is that we will include that contribution plus wherever the final number we land at for additional contributions as a in the town warrant this year.
So the 44.5 was sort of an intermediate step because it appeared that those funds had a deficit.
Right.
But in fact, it was just that they hadn't been sort of allocated. Am I following that correctly?
Yeah.
The school committee.
Or hadn't been?
The school committee at the time was not aware that we needed to go through the town warrant process. We thought that we just had the ability to designate the funds into certain.
Okay.
But now learning through your consultant that we now know there's a certain process that needs to occur. So
And
it's
then-
just really covering our tracks.
And then the 342,865, that's from Mark?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
And I'm sorry, just to clarify, the 9% maximum has to do with the undesignated fund balance from the previous years?
Here's budget.
Yeah,
That's a state law.
yes, yep, which was,
It was less.
It used to always be three.
It used to be 3, right?
it used to be 3, it was temporarily elevated during COVID.
Oh,
Last spring, it
Okay.
was enshrined moving
It's a
forward.
lot of
as we move
flexibility for
since.
really big schools to work with.
Right.
Okay.
right.
Yeah, because it's a big difference in 3, but.
Yeah.
whatever.
One quick question I have, and I think this is just something for you and I maybe, but so you have the $20,000, which is undesignated fund.
Right.
The 15,000 you're saying is gonna be an operational budget.
Right.
In case if I forget to connect with you, in terms of where I entered that into the trio.
So it exists already in the
Oh, it
trio
is?
numbers,
Okay,
it exists, that's
Okay.
part of why in the facilities, and then, those
Okay.
costs are included in the facilities and the food service.
I just wanna make sure that I properly allocate that in these, so.
Yeah, they're already there on the expense side.
Thank
They're
you.
already exist on the expense side. It's our. budget summary.
And so, I guess in terms of capital, since John is here, I did notice your capital policy is anything over 20,000, which it will be consistent. Is that right?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
we held
Oh,
off
you did?
updating ours until the select board had adopted that policy, and then we subsequently have adopted one with a similar threshold.
And John is more conversant in the language, but in these, item replacement costs, they look a little low to me, and I'm wondering, are you including inflation, sort of calculation of inflation, like the capital, that finance committee is?
Yeah,
You are? Okay.
yes, yes. I modeled it after the finance committee's process with the municipal.
Okay. And John, are you thinking of adding these, are these in our capital?
I didn't hear the question.
Are they in our capital planning spreadsheets? The school stuff? I thought they were.
No, I hadn't updated it, but I will.
Okay,
They are in the database that
Yeah.
Andrew has
Andrew's
developed.
working
Yeah.
on.
right.
Yeah.
But they're not, we have,
Right.
it's not. in
Yeah,
what
what we've shared with the select board didn't have the school represented.
Okay. And your current balance in your capital funds as of now is this.
That was as
third
of January first, and
Yeah.
those were, it was starred, I guess, somehow the little
But-
note is, those were the cash balances,
column. Okay,
right? So, as we're in this transition phase, I feel like, in the reporting.
so that was my question. So these allocations, this 165 will bump those numbers up.
No, the 165, because that was
It's shown as-
this is shown there, right?
Alright.
Yeah. So it includes those. It does not include the 44.5 that was approved in the January 24th special meeting. And of course, yeah, what I'm recommending to contribute additionally.
Excuse me, go ahead.
No, just we had a discussion in the last school committee meeting around kind of how to potentially divvy up the 155 into which reserve accounts and so forth. So we have some tentative thinking about that to try and get each of those three reserve accounts at the top, the capital, transportation and playground, roughly to about 40% of our kind of desired end state. So I think with that 155, we could make additional contributions, accounting for the 165 that's already been approved and the 44.5. So anyway, just to reflect kind of how our most recent conversations about our capital
And-
reserve accounts.
What is the tuition rate to Yarmouth nowadays about?
It differs middle school to high school, but between 15 to 17.
1,000?
Yep. Per student.
And do we have a contract?
We do.
Through 2031.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, we have that contract, just, I know this is a big question, so the tuition contract's through 2031, our CTC contract is through June 2027, and our current teacher contract is through 2028. December 2028.
And our superintendent just signed another 2-year contract, so. Yeah.
Aaron, is there any limitations on capital, planning, reserve account allocation recommendations for school?
No, I'm not sure what you mean by limits.
Well, you can't do any more than 9% with your undesignated fund balance. Is there any limitation on how much you can recommend as a school committee with reserve funds based on your budget?
No, yeah. I think in part because it has the mechanism of going through, a town warrant
Right.
and voter approval.
Any more questions on the numbers that Aaron just presented on the budget?
I have a quick question about, with the flex passes having been removed with.
And can we hold that? So I think what
Yes.
might be worthwhile is to go through our sort of highlights of our budget and then because we could spend all night on CTC. So I kind of want to bring that at the end, if you don't mind. And we did not prepare a budget summary other than what we provided in the packet, but I think we can go through and we'll answer some of our questions. I mean, some of the questions we asked in our summary, but I think in terms of major changes to the budget, there's sort of two, I think, highlights. One is just our capital planning. We're definitely looking at, where are we at right now in terms of capital contributions tentatively? 700 and.
Yeah, we want to target 770,000, but that's the municipal part.
Right, on the
So-
municipal side.
Right.
And
And we can add up projects that were submitted and what all the departments want that, and the priority projects that are on the select board's list to maybe 250,000 above that.
Right.
So we have to figure out
we have a big
how to
differential
finance those.
between the needs and what we can afford without the target being for a tax increase. We're really try to look at a steady tax increase instead of a big bump up. And so I think it's a little bit trying to kind of bring those numbers together is gonna be challenging. And, we're definitely looking at, bonding in the near future for particularly for the Stone Wharf project and potentially other projects. And so overall, I don't have the number in my head. Stone Wharf is, 7 to 8 million. South Shore Drive is 1 million. I mean, do you have a handle on the total capital cost? If you count the fire department building, we're looking at 15 million or something in that
Well,
ballpark.
we have some really rough estimates in that one summary spreadsheet, but it's 12 to 14 million.
Yeah, 12 to
something like
14.
that.
And that's not reachable at 700,000 a year. So
Right.
that's where we've been very focused on capital planning, not so much on operational stuff, because really kind of been dealing with that with the departments. I would say on the departmental side, the only major kind of bump we're gonna see is maybe the fire department potentially, because they had to buy some air tanks and replace their air tanks. And so that right now is a pretty big expense.
Possibly per diems too.
And possible per diem. So and one reason I didn't prepare a budget is we don't have those numbers, so that's kind of gonna have that will have a major impact on the bottom line budget. So once we have that, we can share that with you. We don't need to come back to that, but as soon as we have that in a more, I think, solid format, we'll make sure you guys have that, and we can put it in a summary format similar to what you had. So I think those are the two really big items that,
Fire department, there is a slight increase in the transfer
Okay.
station just with the brush dump. The costs of that has significantly increased, but the board is talking about potentially starting charging commercial users to dump at the brush dump. And so if that happens, that the revenue of that would offset that increase a bit. But that's something that would be implemented with the start of the new fiscal year.
and so the two things also that we sort of added this year that I think have been beneficial, even though they're a cost, is contracted services in terms of financial assistance with Mark and also engineering assistance with GEI. So those are new additional costs, but we're not adding staff, we're just adding contracted services, and we plan to continue that going forward for the near future. Not sure, like Mark, it's hard to know. I think that eventually will kind of settle out in terms of what we might need or not need, but I think, for us, it's been very helpful after a pretty messed up audit to have Mark come on board, and I know that's difficult for you guys, that you didn't have an audit report, and I know the state gets squirrely about that, but I think he convinced us, Vika, a little reluctantly, that just start from square one, clean books, and if you do keep it up to date, then we know where we are. And so I feel a lot more confident, I think the board does, about our finances, and that I don't think there's any loss that we ended up moving on from the last auditor we had. So anyway, I'd say, we are looking at some of the department's solid waste in particular, and trying to adjust some of the fee schedules to try to compensate for some of these increases, particularly solid waste. Has been a big one in terms of cost increasing beyond the fee increase. And there may be some other ones we have to look at as we go forward. Plus, we haven't really talked about it, but the transfer station is going to need an investment somewhere, and we don't really have a sense of what that scope is. And for our COLA increase, Vika, based on what she's heard locally, people are between 3 and 4 in this area. She's recommending 4%. And that's where we are right now. And then in terms of health insurance benefits, our overall cost for fiscal year 27 right now is about 145,000, which is about a 3% increase over last year. We've kind of it's been a bit of a, people are jumping onto the plan that weren't before because of the federal healthcare change. So it's actually increased our costs. It's not so much the premium cost, but just more people participating. And so I think that's, right now, we're not anticipating a huge increase, but it's calendar year as opposed to fiscal year, so it's a little funky that way. But, I think those are the major things that, and we don't know yet what our county tax deal is. So I don't know what that will be, but maybe at least we're not Washington County. And then a couple challenges we're facing right now, we're not sure we're gonna have a sheriff full-time for the summer, just due to staffing limitations. So that, that we'll have to figure out how we're gonna do that. And then which is great, in the sense we save some money, but on the flip side, it's looking like we're gonna need some per diem fire department or fire and rescue people, so that cost will probably eclipse what we could potentially save on part-time staffing on the sheriff's side, so a net increase most likely. Again, don't know yet what those numbers are. So that's it in a nutshell. I think, no major staffing changes that I don't think that we're considering at this point. We feel fortunate that we are staffed, particularly at Public Works. They've been a huge improvement. And, I think right now we're kind of stable for like at least a month or two, so that's kind of nice. So I think that's, that's kind of it. I think John's team, the finance committee, has spent an enormous amount of time on the capital planning. It will have a significant impact on our taxes in town, and I think we need to expect a tax increase. It's just trying to moderate that. And then they're also looking at a circuit breaker program for people that would qualify. And one thing I'd say, is it fair to say that our taxes have not increased at the same rate as, other communities in the area? So we've been.
The tax increases in Cumberland and Yarmouth are substantially more than they have been in Quebec.
And I thought even Chip was saying relative to inflation, we were kind of on the low end, right?
Yes.
So we've been perhaps a little conservative, and we're trying now to avoid a big bump and see, but we are gonna be looking at, I would say, some moderate tax increases going forward, most likely. Yeah.
Well, two questions, totally unrelated. The first one is, the roads, obviously of huge improvement, thanks to Mark and the crew's work, planning for that, having that road plan made a huge difference. Is that still ongoing? Like, is the money being set aside every year to keep up on it?
We
hope.
reactivated the road committee, much to their dismay. And they have kind of come up with a new, Mark, why don't you answer the question where we're at right now?
Yeah, so quickly, we didn't quite finish our paving plan, which we tried to do in 10 years. It's now been more like 16. So we've got a recommendation in place right now in capital for the select board to decide what to recommend, along with the finance committee, of how much to actually finish up the stretch of South Road and some small chip sealing on some of the side roads. We're also working closely with the finance committee for future contributions into a reserve account for planning for the future of sealing roads up as they age.
Yeah, nice. Great. Yeah, my second question is, on TV, you see all the political ads, and I quite honestly don't pay any attention to them, but one, I don't even remember which candidate it was, but one of them said their idea was to tax non-residents at a higher property tax rate than local residents. Is that like even something,
It's
like,
not-
is that something a town can do?
It's not legal in Maine, as far as I know. I think it's prohibited, but I think Massachusetts in particular has looked at that. There are other types of taxes, though, that some states, Massachusetts has really been working hard on some kind of transfer tax to kind of, particularly million and plus homes. And so there are, I think Maine, as far as I know, it's not feasible in Maine, and I think we've been at least exploring what circuit breaker programs there are, and there's some available to people that they may not even know about. So our first step is going to be to make sure everybody's aware, and then after that, but I do think, it's going to be a challenge. And one of my concerns as we go through on these big infrastructure projects is we don't wanna tax ourselves off tax the community off the island, basically. So I think that's gonna take some compromises on everybody's part. And so we will do the best we can. One of the things we are pursuing pretty aggressively, and Vika got over, $1 million in FEMA money, then we got an earmark for the stone pier. So, I mean, we've got $2 million that we weren't gonna have. And then we're really strongly recommending if they pursue the fire department building, they look for an earmark for that. And then we're, as we speak, submitting a grant to the state for funding for the stone pier. So I think trying to access as much that it was a little bit better, there was a little bit better outlook for outside funding in, before this administration, but there still is some money out there that we're looking for. So I think that's one area where we can get some relief. So we've already got 2 million, so that's good.
And not just in the bigger grants, we have,
Right, a lot of.
we have several $100,000 in grants right now, that probably a dozen grants that we're actively working on. Some of them are just $5,000-6,000, and others are, we just received this, or we're gonna receive, we just got qualified for a $68,000 grant that we submitted to do some preliminary engineering work on Cousins Island to determine what we should do with the wharf and what we should do with the parking lot, because we're financially responsible for that part too. So and that's a whole other challenge, is how to balance all those grants. And the other part that the board definitely invested in is we have 2 interns that are working for us full time, and for taxpayers on one is for 1 year, one is for 2 year, for taxes, as far as the taxpayers are concerned, on a yearly basis. So for the 2 that we have now, it's a $21,000 investment. So for $21,000 stretched across a whole tax year, we have 2 full-time people that are dedicating their time towards a lot of this work too. So there's been good work put into that, but definitely not enough.
And I think for us, because we're still, some stuff is still outstanding, and we will be working closely with the finance committee, trying to make some decisions. We'll know better, and I would say a month and a half, kind of where we're at, and we'll certainly make sure we communicate with you guys. And, I think one thing we discussed at the last select board meeting is maybe doing a better communication out to the community, maybe in written form, like an actual newsletter, or, not an annual report perhaps, but to take the place of that, to send everybody the budget, particularly if there's gonna be a bit of an increase, explain why, explain where we're at, because otherwise we will have our meeting, but we haven't had particularly great attendance, at our joint budget meeting. So to allow, another mechanism to explain to people kind of, what to be expected for the budget, because we don't want people showing up at town meeting for the first time and saying, whoa, what's going on? So that's the plan, but we haven't really, we'll have to sort of figure the dates on that. And our next, I think, Aaron, you had said our joint budget presentation, which will be the finance committee, the select board, and the school committee, is May 13th, I think. So, but we'll be back in touch with more details on our budget before then.
Which is a Thursday, that may
So
be
Wednesday, May 13th.
Wednesday.
Yeah.
And you guys had a great presentation last year, so I think something like that would be fabulous. The finance committee's done some pretty I think we're the slackers here, so we're gonna have to up our game. So before we move on to the CTC question, just
But
one
here,
other.
I'd like to say something.
Yeah.
About the budget as well, and I hadn't talked to you about this. So as someone who's in education for well over 30 years, I know the value of what you do, and also the value of what it means for our community. And looking at this, so we're at about 25% of our town budget is the school, and I pay taxes in Cumberland. It's up to over 63% of the tax bill in Cumberland. And if we were still a part of Cumberland, our taxes would be, am I correct, 75% higher than what we're paying for our properties. If we had stayed with the town of Cumberland, that's looking at the value of my property and what it would be if we had stayed with the town of Cumberland. So I'm really well aware of how good this looks in many ways. But I also want to say, I know that, does the school pay 100% of healthcare for all employees?
Right, yeah, we didn't, yeah.
And
Yeah, that
that isn't, so that doesn't happen for our town employees. And I think as a select person, I think it's really important that the employees for the school and the town be on the same page. So I know that you're tied in with the contracts, which are so important to keep stability. But I think it's really important to look at having some contributions, if that's possible, with school employees in the future, to put them on par with what's happening for the town. Also, I appreciate that people, and I understand how important it is. I don't want this to be taken the wrong way, but I like that our school pays the rate of what people earn on the mainland and how much that's been increasing, which is so important. But I also look at if the budget has gone up 45,000 this next year, yet when I look at the lower rate of tuition that's being paid, so the tuition being paid to the town of Yarmouth is going from 260 to 162, if I'm reading that correctly. So that's going down 100,000, and the debt is being retired, which is 10% of your budget. I'd like to ask if this could come in a more lean way, because we're facing some big expenditures with our town, and I'm just gonna ask for that, because I wonder if there's some other ways that you could rein some of these expenses in, when I look at the fact that some of our town employees aren't paid at the same rate that they are in the mainland, quite honestly. And I think that that's an issue that all of us need to be concerned with for our town. Anyway, I'm just saying, in the future, I'd like to be able to see a budget that is, that balances that as well. You know what I'm saying?
I do. I mean, I can clarify on the health insurance. I mean, there's, one, we'll have to look at that in the cycle when the teacher's contract is.
I understand that.
It's embedded in that. I would say also a distinction. I mean, I think it merits some investigation, because, well, the contract currently calls for 100% of a single subscriber. There's no contribution for dependents or family, right? So there's a distinction between what's true on the other side. So I think it's not.
Good to know.
Right, so.
So I actually
The
think
comparison's
it's
different.
town side that has a more generous health insurance policy. So the difference
Oh, is
is,
that so?
the school is 100% single subscriber, so that employee gets their health insurance 100% paid for, and that's all staff, all eligible staff.
All eligible stuff. Yeah.
But on the town sides, it's 90%. When it's an individual employee, and 80% of a full-time.
And it's prorated if you're part-time.
Right, but for a person
Okay.
with a family, that policy is about $30,000, and the town pays 80%, which is much more than a single
Okay.
subscriber.
Oh,
So,
good, thank you.
so
Then I
it's
was
really
reading
the
that.
town side that kind of needs to I think adjusted over time,
Okay.
potentially to, and I don't think you can, I think it's difficult with existing arrangements to make changes to those, positions, but future hires could be done differently. That's how it usually works. So I think it's a knotty problem that we will have to work with, but it's actually the town side that is more generous. And it used to be that a lot of people were picking up, other types of insurance, and that's not happening.
I think one area where the town and the school, I mean, when you think about it, we're all under the same umbrella. It's all the same tax pool, but I think one area looking in the future where the town and the school can work together is to see if maybe we can overlap the benefits somehow, because you have, and it doesn't happen frequently, but it has happened enough where you have an employee that's working for the school, which is town of Shebig. They get 100% of their benefits, and then you have the spouse working for the town. they get 90% of their benefits, or the person for the school gets 100%, but then they put their family, and so there is a way where if you have families that are working for the town of Shebig, where one is for the school, one is for the town, where the town of Shebig ultimately ends up spending more money because of the unbalanced benefits that are coming from both sides, and it's not a disadvantage to the individuals that have taken advantage of those perks. It's just how the town taxpayers ultimately end up paying, because we're the same umbrella, it's not as aligned. And I think that's just something for kind of the school and the town in the future to try to balance it out. So it's a benefit for the taxpayers as a whole, to have it, you know, kind of be collective. And it's not, I think, a fault of anybody. I think it's, from my understanding, the reason that that came to play was because the school was through private and it was so much more expensive, whereas the town is through MMA, bigger number, bigger pool, they're able to provide it at a lower cost, even though the town pays in kind of the cheapest amount. MMA has a lot more, you know, people that sign up for it than through a private Anthem. So I think it made sense in hindsight, but I think for taxpayers and what they pay for, there might be a room for some collaboration in the future somehow for any future people that kind of sign on to it.
And it was that we continued the existing teacher contracts when we became a new town, and that was part of the separation agreement. So that was part of it, and Cumberland had that type of contract, and they were using Maine School Management Insurance, which was different than Maine Municipal. And so it really was an artifact that we were kind of carrying forward, and that was a standard practice in the education sector. And SAD 51 is separate, it's a separate entity than the town, which is a little different than here. So
Yeah.
I think, you know, there's a way to align those, but I think it's gonna be over time. And I think trying to be fair to people is the key, but also I think we all recognize providing decent health insurance is probably our best incentive for getting good quality employees and keeping them, because I think it's, you know, so it's not something we want to monkey with without considering. So the other thing, I think, before we fly the coop here, and Vika can take the lead on this, is sort of the arrangements you have with CTC, because ours have changed, and we just wanted to understand kind of, and we do have a contract, we don't have a contract, we don't have a contract per se. So we use, you know, we use CTC, you guys use CTC, and again, this is an area where it seems to be two different things, and so why don't you?
The town had historically only had 3 parking spaces down there. And this year we negotiated where 2 of them were getting on Cousins Island, where 2 of them were getting for free. And that's something that we worked out. And so I think the question that we had was just kind of, because the town had no right to do anything on the school behalf, but just wanted to make sure that with the flex passes haven't been eliminated, and kind of the bit of a hiccup and headache that the town went through, that the school was able to work something out favorable on your behalf that hopefully would.
No.
So what do you have now?
So we have 5 passes that we pay. Annual passes that we pay over there, and we maintain 1 flex pass, because it was we do have a contract, I can share that to circulate. And so it was part of our contract, so my conversation with Matt, when that came up, was like, well, it's in our contract, and you know, so our flex pass remains in use there, but it's essentially another, right, a 6th, you know, kind of parking pass that we're paying. So we pay full. It actually only gets used 4 out of 5 days of the week, because one day we don't have somebody coming over, but you know, so yeah, but no.
What 2020, what year did you say that's through? 2027?
2027, I think, yeah.
So next year.
And we were paying for 3 annual passes. And now what we have is, I wouldn't call them free. We're not paying an annual fee
Right.
to the lot that we lease from this, that we get leased from the state of Maine.
You're not paying
But-
parking your own.
But the other sort of disadvantage, and we'll see how much of an issue it will be, because it's not a problem this time of year, is those spaces are not physically located. We don't have a sticker, so people have to come in and the attendant has to assure them, and we have a sign up sheet. I guess that's how it's.
We do the same.
We're doing through a
flex pass,
calendar,
they have to go
through Google Calendar. But I think the one difference with the town versus the school is you guys are using them pretty much consistently every day. We have, the town has historically paid the $1,000 for the commuter to Shebeg when on an average, that was being used once, sometimes 2 days a week, and on occasion, maybe a couple times a year where there would be an overlap or it was a couple of users. And so cost for what the town was paying, it was kind of absurd. And then we were also paying for the sheriff to physically have their car there only from Memorial Day to Labor Day, and we were paying the full annual cost of it. So,
Yeah.
if you have a contract, that's another opportunity for the town
You know,
and
we do
the
pay
school
the
too.
full annual, right? I mean, those spots don't get used from mid-June to, Labor Day essentially, right?
So that's an
That's-
area maybe
and
where the
then-
town and the school can
Yeah, we do
come
open.
forces and, cause at the end of the day, it's the taxpayers that are paying for it.
And part of the reaction just was we just have gone through, because we had a resignation, so we've had a vacancy for a little while. We were finally able to fill it for one of our special education positions at the building. So we couldn't find somebody on the island at the moment, but found somebody off island to fill the position. So we were requesting additional, this is a full-time, 5 days a week position. So requesting an additional parking permit and we've been denied.
So one suggestion, I know probably time to wrap up, but one thing that I will make a recommendation is if you ever go over what you're currently paying for, definitely reach out to Andrew or I instead of paying the additional $50 a day.
Yeah.
We can, as long as we have the advance notice, we can put it on the calendar, because I would hate to see the school,
Yes.
you know.
So are
Okay.
you supposed to be paying $50 a day for your person now? Is that?
No, they've kind of held off charging us while we're gone through an appeal process.
Okay.
So.
I was just saying that if they have anyone
Right,
coming,
they
like
could
an
use our
additional
slot.
person or something beyond what they're already paying,
Yeah.
it would be
I'll check in.
silly if the town has those spots that are,
Paying on top of that.
so that's, I think, just
There's
an
kind of
opportunity
empty
for us
spots
to
and
work
we're
together,
paying
yeah.
additionally, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But excuse me, do you have 5 flex passes?
No,
No, we just have one.
You have one flex pass and the other 5 are for the full-time employees.
and
So it's not like we could have the sheriff's car parking in one of your spots for the summer.
but I do think you
Close.
guys operate on the school year, which to me is less of a concern for CTC, so if you would like the select board to support your request, just let us know, because I really think that this lot needs to be operated for the benefit of the community and in particular, the municipal and school operations. So that's my opinion. The board hasn't decided anything, but I think we would certainly could discuss it at a board meeting. And if you, because I think we had what we thought was a reasonable outcome of, I think Vika, we weren't sure how it was gonna come out, and I think it's better than I
There are
expected.
Conversations to have, I think it's.
Right, but I mean, I do think you need to be able to, I would not want you to have to pay $50 a day for your person. That's crazy.
The other thing I thought of just with this specific parking thing is Kids Place has had 2 mainland teachers who have had 2 passes in the Cousins lot, and both of those teachers left in the fall. Kids Place now only has 1 Cousins Island lot, so it's
Okay,
the space has already been filled, I'm sure, but that is a change from early education.
right.
I'm sympathetic. It's hard to allocate those spaces, but at the same time, I think it's important that we had a lot of trouble last year and people coming that were having, getting sent off and having trouble parking ourselves, which when you live here, that's a little maddening. So, I think it's a future conversation, but I think, you know, working
Yeah.
together with CTC is probably the best way.
Sounds great. Yep.
So,
Okay.
John, did you have, I didn't really, did you have?
I had one issue. There was a discussion at one of the select board meetings about one of the warrant articles that the school had last year that gave the school basically total flexibility to move money between cost centers. So that's very different than the town has. The town can move money as long as they don't spend more than 10% in any given cost center. And Aaron and I talked about that a little bit. And do you guys really need that or?
I mean, I think, I mean, in my short tenure, you know, we haven't utilized that, right? I think part of this is with Mark's help, building a stronger, you know, into fiscal year closing process will put us in a position to have to consider whether that's necessary or not, right?
Yeah.
When we haven't had that kind of practice, you know, again, in kind of the 2 fiscal years I've seen the end of from FY 25, right? And then FY 26, or no, I'm sorry, FY 24 and FY 25. You know, we haven't had the effect changes, right? But you know, there is, you know, we haven't gotten feedback from the state either that was problematic in any way, but I think that would be the concern is, you know, from the state perspective, the DOE, because we do a bunch of reporting at the State Department of Education, whether we need to, you know, be able to move money across
Yeah,
those.
it's just a very liberal
Mhm.
ability to move funds between different cost centers.
Right, and I think with a $1 million+ budget
Think,
for the taxpayers, providing, I mean, personally, I just think that's a lot of latitude. I'm not sure the public understands what they're approving in that case, because I know when I was on the school committee, it was like 5%.
yeah, and the history I got, I was just pulling up when I was consulting with the town attorney about the question was, and I don't know if this resonates with the history, was that additional flexibility, he says, was included during COVID, during one of the COVID budget cycles because of the uncertainty, and it's kind of persisted since then. So he as well is
okay.
like, you know, could, you know, is it still necessary, right? So that can be a conversation we can have as we get ready to
Yeah.
prepare the warrants on our side. We haven't exercised that flexibility at any point in my tenure.
Yeah, I think everybody respects the fact that you're all
Right.
trying to do a good job, doing a good job and serious about doing the right thing for the schools.
Yeah.
Perhaps it could be written in a slightly different fashion, that's all.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for example, special town meeting we just had was to go allocate some, you know, that, you know, we potentially could have moved around inside, but we have to, you know, we want the public to know what we're doing.
Yeah,
So,
no,
I guess. I'm speaking for myself, it's, you know, I'm not real comfortable with that policy or budget, a warrant article, because I think the voters should know where the money's going.
Yeah.
And that's what we're voting on at town meeting. And, you know, I think we have not felt the constraint of, you know, having in the departmental constraint of being able to move money around, and maybe just matching what the town has, which is 10% would be the thing you could consider.
Mhm.
You know,
That makes sense.
yeah, that makes sense.
and I don't think the budget police don't come after if you do go over it, is what I'm told, but I think it's sort of just a policy that, you know, or and a warrant article that kind of keeps the rails on. We don't worry about our boards, it's that future crazy board.
I've been the town administrator in the last 4 years. We've had 2 warrant articles where we've had to, the following budget cycle, we had to allocate, like one was legal, 10,000 or something, because we exceeded it. And that was just, you know, more or less for the transparencies of the taxpayers.
New.
Yeah, so we'll see that up, we'll stop.
Thank you for taking good care of us.
Yes, and thanks for the successful model. I mean, it's not as,
Could you allow one more question?
it's these guys, they have a meeting coming up.
Oh, you do? I agree with Carol that if you continue to have that issue with CTC about the daily parking thing, I would consider the school board asks the town of Shivick Select Board for their backing on that, first of all. Second of all, the people, the students that come from the mainland, and kudos to you all for getting that going. Are those families responsible for the tuition and the transportation?
Yeah.
For back and forth themselves?
Yes.
And then one boring question, if I may,
Mhm.
the oil furnace up at the old oil burner at
Oh,
the
yeah.
school, is that utilized still?
It is still utilized
Are you planning to
less.
replace that even though you've got the heat pump system?
We're not currently, we continue to get it inspected and
Okay.
it's continuing to chug
Still
along.
functioning?
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
It's amazing how old that is.
As old as you, Mark.
Been there a long time.
I was gonna say that's kind of critical, and it's a little bit like up at the Historical Society, they have to, well, they have another reason they have to keep their furnace running, but obviously in major extended power outages, you can power with a portable, generator, of oil furnace, but
Yeah.
you can't power here.
Yeah, no, I'm
It's,
just curious
our
how.
hot water is also still connected to it, so it's.
Oh, it is?
That we
Oh, yeah.
eventually.
I think an electric, you don't have electric hot water though?
I would, well, I think my understanding is.
I think there's electric hot water heater in there,
So much. Anyway, okay.
yeah.
So that's possibly a capital need at some point.
Yeah.
And they have a capital plan and I don't know if the furnace is.
Would you,
But
would you
furnace,
replace
I'm
it
saying.
when it
The furnace.
goes?
We haven't figured out that plan. I mean, the heat pumps have been a great addition. And I think, Addison, one of the interns, is over today and,
Crunching the
looking-
numbers.
Yeah, crunching the numbers, which thus far look pretty favorable in terms of efficiency and cost savings. And so-
Well, you have a generator, right?
and we do have a generator.
Can that run the heat pumps?
No, it's not.
So we gotta get them solar next.
Yeah.
That's what they really need.
That generator was brought over from the pond
Should
and
let-
exactly.
it was never properly sized
Right.
for all of that.
Yeah, it does just basic lights.
So thanks, guys. I think we'll get out of here.
Have your meeting.
You have the data.
Actually going elsewhere.
Thanks for